Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Feedback, presented by Yarn Wire. Feedback is a twice-weekly investigation into the complex relationships between composers, performers, and culture. My name is Argeo Ascani, and I will be moderating today, and I am joined, of course, by the members of Yarn Wire, first of which is Ning Yu.
Hello.
Ian Antonio.
Hey there.
Laura Barger.
Hi.
Russell Greenberg.
What's up?
And we have two special guests with us today, the first of which is Jacob Rodebeck. Jacob was the pianist for Yarn Wire from 2008 to 2011.
Hello.
Hello. And of course, our star today is the lovely and talented Kate Soper.
Hey, everybody.
Hello, Kate. Kate is a composer, performer, and associate professor of music at Smith College. Now, if you have been following this series, you should have some background information on Yarn Wire. And if you missed the first episode, you should check it out at yarnwire.org, where you can sort of go through the archive of all of these shows to sort of learn more, to catch you up to speed to where we are today. And since we know so much about Yarn Wire already, I thought we'd spend a little bit of time talking to Kate Soper, just to see what makes her tick.
Sorry, that came out a little weirder than I meant it to.
That's all right. That was a little bit like weird phrasing that I used anyway. That's all right.
Yes, that's all right.
So Kate, I wanted to learn a little bit about sort of where your grounding as a composer came from and what sort of interests you in composing in general.
Sure. Well, composing was something that I was just always doing since I was a little kid. So, which was at first banging around on the piano. Relevant instrument for today. Oops. Sorry, microphone things are happening. Okay. And yeah, so by the time I got to be old enough to go to college, I had enough of a kind of body of made up stuff that I applied to music schools as a composer. And piano was the instrument I auditioned on with varying degrees of success. And then once I got to college, took a couple of years to decide that I really did want to dedicate myself to trying to be a composer after realizing it was going to be more difficult than it had felt when I was just a kid messing around. And just kind of continued on the pretty normal path of undergrad and then grad school at Columbia, which is where I met Yarn Wire and many other of my cherished musical collaborators. And just kind of took it from there. And
most composers have some type of grounding in piano, or at least the ability to sort of like fool around on the keyboard in some way. But you are a quite accomplished singer. How did vocalizing come into your life?
Well, it's funny. I think I've never really been a world-class performer, but there were times when I was sort of more proficient on piano and then more proficient on voice. And now I haven't practiced either in months, but I think when I was growing up, it was easy to interact with the piano. And as you say, most composers do end up kind of using it like a typewriter or something. It's just sort of there to help you as a tool to write music. And I, took piano lessons and enjoyed that. As a singer, I think different, sorry, I feel like this keeps happening, but someone give me a signal if you can't hear me. But if you're not, born with one of those instruments and you just like already have vibrato when you're 13 or something, it's easy to just think like, well, my voice is definitely not good enough to sing on stage. So I would get like a small part in the musical or something, but basically never considered myself to be a singer of any repute or potential until I got to New York. And at that point, it wasn't so much that I felt confident about my singing as that I fell in with a group of really incredible composer performers and they could use a singer, and that was Wet Ink, which I'm still a member of. And because I think new music pianists have to still be pianists, like you still, better play your Chopin etudes, even if you're just playing Sciarrino or whatever. But new music vocalists, not to cast aspersions, but I think it's a little easier to come without a classical training like myself and just say like, well, I'm game to do literally whatever with my voice. And through that process, I sort of discovered that actually, I do have a trainable instrument. I have a, very serious depth of musicianship at this point. So it was basically in my mid-late 20s that I started getting serious and studying. And then I think at that point, my singing started to eclipse my piano playing, which was suffering from neglect. And I kind of focused more on that as a performer. So yeah, but both of those things have been a part of my life in various ways and continue to be.
And do you think, like, if you sort of think about it today, do you think that the singing and the composing are sort of just two parallel sort of channels that are sort of going, or is it sort of like a braid that's like intertwined to each other?
That's interesting. I think composing is the through line for me because I wasn't always a performer, and now I mean, now no one's really a performer right now in this historical moment in time, but performing is something that gives me a lot of pleasure and a lot of joy, but I think I think I have more of the mentality. I don't quite have the the specific work ethic of being a performer, the kind of like physical work ethic of practicing. So those definitely have been things that are really important to me, and I use them as I compose. But I think the real performance track is something that's a little bit something I'm really happy that I was able to participate in, but is something that always feels like a kind of a extra thing for me.
When you are in the act of composing, and sort of, whatever material is inside of you or in your head or wherever you find it from, and it makes its way into paper. Could you describe like Donatoni, right? Franco Donatoni, the composer who's no longer with us, Italian composer, always talked about composing as being like a fire. And the act of composing was the fire, and the work that resulted were like just the embers that was left over. That the weight for him was always on the action of making it. And for you, what is composing mean to you? The process of it, what goes through you when you're actually writing? That's
interesting. I hadn't heard that. I feel like for me, it's maybe more that the composing is the embers, because it's like it's so constant. Like when I'm writing a piece, not always, but especially lately, and actually with Wolf, my Joran Meyer piece too, there's just like all this stuff that I'm thinking about, and then the piece is kind of the tip of the iceberg or something. So the piece is more like the fire, like it's there and you can like watch it and it has a trajectory and it, gets brighter and then it goes away. But for me, it's usually a lot of thinking, a lot of sketching, a lot of throwing stuff away and starting over, and a lot of revision, after the piece is done and years after. So yeah, I think it's a sort of a constant sense of growth, and sometimes it even feels like the piece is sort of if I'd had 10 more years to work on it, it probably would be really different or something. It kind of never ends. It's just sort of this like instance of material. It's more in time than the process itself, which is just sort of always going on.
And a sizable portion of your work that you're writing does involve you, and so as a performer. But this piece that you wrote for Joran Meyer, which is titled Wolf, does not. And I'm wondering for you if there's sort of a difference between writing music that involves you, so you can sort of be part of that sort of like moment, or handing it off to a group that doesn't involve you. If there's
right. Well, I mean, one nice thing about working with Joran Meyer is it definitely didn't feel like a process that didn't involve me, because I was already working pretty regularly with Ian Antonio, who's also in Wet Ink, and then, was friends with everybody else. So I think there was probably a lot of back and forth. And then, so it's funny, I forgot that was 2010. So it's like 10 years ago that this piece happened. But in terms of not being a performer in it, that was true, but I was in a rare situation at that moment in time in which I was living with a piano, which wasn't really true. Basically, after I moved out of my parents' house, continuing to the present day, I have not had a piano in my house, but I was on a residency where there was one there. So I did actually have a lot of interface, and, we were like staring at each other every day, me and the piano. So even though I wasn't performing in it, I think there was a hands-on interaction with the instrument. But then, I think, again, that was right. Like the pieces I started writing right after that were pretty much the first pieces I ever wrote with myself as a vocalist. So Wolf is kind of the end of, or the last piece of kind of like, I'm a composer writing instrumental music or music for other people. And here it is. And the very next piece, and basically the next 10 years, were me writing pieces for myself as a vocalist.
And so question to Yarn Wire now. So it's somewhere in the late, 2000s, aughts. So somewhere in the late aughts. And
we're calling them aughts.
We're calling them aughts now, everyone, in case you weren't aware. Sometime in the late aughts, you as a group had a decision, or came to the decision to sort of commission this relatively, at that time, young composer, Kate Soper. Someone talk me through sort of the process of how that came about.
Yeah, I think it was right at the end of our kind of collective years in graduate school. And we had kind of explored a lot of the repertoire that we were working on in graduate school. And a lot of those pieces were these large pieces that were created at IRCAM, pieces by Philippe Leroux or Michael Jarrell. And we had one concert where we moved what would have been like an 18-wheeler's worth of gear into New York City, and realized that it was a completely unfeasible model to work with. And at that point, we really decided we needed to work with the people we knew, kind of our contemporaries in the field, and those were our friends. So yeah, we kicked off a project called Composing New York. I'm not sure, was that an internal name or was that a name we put on?
I think it was the name of the show at Roulette where we did this music. But I don't know if, I don't remember.
That was the official name, actually.
Yeah.
I think we have a program, an image of the program actually, that maybe we can throw up. And I think it says Composing New York on there.
Ah, there it is.
Nice.
It's number 2. I can't actually see it myself. Does it say number 2?
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
Part 1 and part 2.
Yeah.
Was that is that a Microsoft jam?
Certainly looks like it.
And I just remember when you said that you did it at Roulette, I was thinking, you guys never played that piece at Roulette, but it was the old Roulette.
Yeah,
That's
it was
right.
the old
I
Roulette.
do remember that
On
concert.
Green Street.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if I can just add one thing, I think just to very quickly piggyback on what Ian said, I think part of one of the things that came out of this project was an effort to sort of contrast with that gear-heavy first effort that we made. And so one of the options we asked composers to consider in this project was using piano for hands instead of 2 pianos. And so in fact, a lot of the pieces that came out, like Kate's, are just for a single piano with 2 players or more.
I do remember sitting on the steps outside Prentice Hall up at Columbia, and with Kate, you, Alex Minchek, Sam Pluta, and Eric Wubbles, and saying, this concert's going to be at Roulette. They only have 1 piano. Could you all please consider writing for piano 4 hands?
Really? Okay. I don't remember that.
You did all say that would be fine.
Yeah.
And then I remember throwing
But there's going to be 6 marimbas. No, just kidding.
No, I said, would you consider writing for 4 1/3 octave marimba 4 hands? And then the 4 of you kind of looked at each other and said, probably not.
And yet later on I did.
True.
For you and me.
Right.
So Ian, you bring up an interesting point there. The other composers on that show, Eric Wubbles, Sam Pluta, and Alex Minchek, along with Kate, are all members of Wet Ink, which is a composing performing ensemble of some renown. If you're not familiar with them, you should check them out. Is this an intentional thing that, this is basically sort of a Wet Ink show, or it's just coincidental?
Yeah, that was definitely intentional. Yeah.
And what was, Ian, you have a relationship with Wet Ink as well. Did that play into a part of sort of, choosing these composers as sort of some of your earlier commissions, right? Because I imagine you guys weren't didn't have like dozens and dozens of pieces commissioned before this. This was relatively early in your commissioning process.
Yeah, this was it within the first probably 10 pieces we ever commissioned. And yeah, Kate, Eric, Alex, and Sam were composers that we all had varying degrees of familiarity with, but I think we all knew them at least a little bit, and really respected and enjoyed and liked their music. So it seemed like a really obvious connection to make.
And Kate, so the other people on the other composers on this program. Did you guys talk to each other at all about sort of like in general what you guys are writing, or did you just sort of do your own thing? And
oh yeah, I mean, in general, we collaborated. That was sort of one of the amazing things about the group, and still is, although it's harder now, is that we performed on each other's pieces. So the wet ink model was definitely very much, exactly what's going on in the music, because you're like, just got handed the part and you're trying to learn it for rehearsal. This piece was a little different because I think this maybe has happened now before, like we will sort of wind up in the same commissioning pod, but this was probably the first time that an outside group, I mean, given we had a lot of connections, but commissioned all four of us. And again, since I was away for that whole fall that I was writing it pretty much, so I don't think I had an opportunity to talk to Alex and Eric and Sam about it much. I do have this memory of like being on a car trip up to Amherst where we had a residency, and I was done with the piece, but I was like making finale corrections, and I had my laptop open and I was in the passenger seat, and like Eric was driving, and he was like, "Are you writing music right now?" I was like, no, I'm just doing the finale stuff. But so that was sort of the extent, I think, of my interaction with my fellows. But I remember all of their pieces, which were all amazing. So it was a nice opportunity to hear their compositional voices in a different way.
And if someone can correct me if I'm wrong, all these pieces are recorded on that first album that you guys recorded on Carrier Records. Is that correct?
Correct.
Awesome. So we're going to listen to a little bit of the piece in just a moment. So get yourself ready for that. But as we sort of get ready to do that, Kate, can you just talk a little bit about sort of how this piece fits into your catalog in relation to the stuff you're making today? It's a relatively small piece compared to perhaps some larger pieces. Is that typical? Is that atypical?
Yeah. It's funny. It feels sort of like hefty to me, just because I think at the time it was sort of big. I think it's maybe like 16 minutes. But yeah, now I'm like writing 2-hour things. Somebody needs to stop me. Yeah, I think I was trying to think about that a little bit this week, but I kind of think that I've always tried to like get something sort of direct and literary or literal across, and this was a piece where I remember struggling with that, not in that I was struggling to write the piece, but just that struggle of trying to like say something was part of the piece itself. So to me, it seems totally related to, my recent fictional YouTube series or whatever it is I'm doing now. But it probably seems different. It's sort of in a category of abstract, contemporary, experimental chamber music versus like, opera or music theater or whatever. But to me, there's a through line, but I think this is more back when I was trying, I think kind of unsuccessfully, but in a way that was interesting to me, to put direct literal concerns into abstract chamber music.
Excellent.
I don't know if that makes any sense, but
that makes a lot of sense to me.
Great.
So we're going to listen to this piece in just a moment. Just as an interesting cultural thought, the late 2000s are sort of at this interesting, sort of access to digital technology point where a lot of people and venues didn't really have high quality cameras and the ability to sort of record in the way that almost everything is recorded today. And so we don't have video of this first performance. And so we're not actually going to be able to see Yarnwire playing this piece. We're just going to be able to listen to the commercial release. But you're going to hopefully see some images of the score, so maybe you can follow along if you're interested in sort of just what's going on. So this piece is entitled Wolf. It's by Kate Soper. And we're not listening to the beginning. We're listening just about 4 minutes in or so, just to sort of give you a little bit of a teaser of sort of the meat of the piece. So let's take a listen. So that was just a little taste of sort of Kate Soper's piece from 2010 called Wolf, performed by Yarn Wire. So Kate, that doesn't sound a lot like a piano. Sounds like a lot of things. Piano is maybe only one of them. Can you talk a little bit about sort of what exactly is going on? Like,
yeah, it's interesting. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I think one of the things I was trying to think about was like, well, what is the sound of a piano? Like, you know, is it this sort of tone that we're used to, or like how can we actually hear the real voice of the piano? And maybe it is just hearing the sound of the hammer thwacking the string, or like the sound of the strings being plucked, you know? So I think I had not really written a lot for piano. I had been playing a lot of piano. I'd done some like singer-songwriter stuff with it, but I often felt just like intimidated or sort of like stifled or like menaced by the piano, because like I said earlier, it's like this kind of useful typewriter for composing, but it's just so, you just have to make a decision about which pitches you're going to play at any given time. And I just found that whenever I tried to write for piano, my hands would just kind of fall in whatever comfortable position they remembered from, you know, too many nocturnes. And I just couldn't, I didn't feel free to interact with it. So writing Wolf, it was just sort of like, okay, here's this like, you know, white row of teeth. Here's this like wolf, this like giant beast. And like, what is really going on inside it? Like, what is it? So, for me, I think presenting these different sounds and trying to make a continuum so that you can hear a piano playing and then you gradually hear like Ian and Russell pressing the strings down, was this idea of like, okay, that sound was already there, present in the nice piano sound. So if we focus on, is that the true authentic sound, or is it plucking, or is it, you know, the sound of people playing woodblocks next to it? So it was some kind of like intense search for what could it mean to hear this instrument in a real way. Mm. And but so yeah, then it ends up sounding like not like the piano.
Yeah, it sounds just like, well, it's basically like Yarn Wire, extremely percussive and extremely piano-y sort of at the same time. And Jacob, you were the pianist during the premiere for this along with Laura. Can you sort of describe to me sort of this, like give me a visual picture of sort of what's going on? It's one piano, all of you are crowded around it.
Yeah, I was reminiscing about having gone back and listened to the piece again, and just thinking like it was so precise. I mean, so much of it, I mean, you see in the score, the rhythms are very delicately notated, and then with all of the inside the piano stuff for both Ian and Russell, and then also for Laura and I later in the piece have more inside the piano playing. It was the precision was really what struck me about the piece, and that was one of the more challenging aspects of learning it and performing it. Was really just making sure that we were getting those sounds right and really bringing it out clearly.
And it sort of looked to me in the score that a lot of the piano parts sort of like seemed to be very close to each other at times and sometimes very far apart from each other. Was there sort of like a negotiation of being able to sort of like get out of each other's way?
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there was always, I remember with all of these forehand pieces, there was always some sort of like choreography that had to happen.
And then, so Russell, so you're inside the piano. Mm-hmm. Can you describe a little bit what you're doing inside the piano?
Yeah, well, like Kate said, we're muting specific strings, trying to get like harmonics and things like that. And as a player, as a percussionist, I'm struggling to remember another piece before this one where we had to do that. This might be the first Yarn Wire piece where, like, I don't know, half of it, a good portion of it, is inside. And so we kind of started developing this. Yeah, you did it.
Yeah.
First. But we had to like kind of develop like a way of approaching the inside. And to be honest, it was frustrating at first because you're looking at an instrument upside down, right? We're used to seeing low to high, but when you're in a piano, low to high being left to right. And then when you're in a piano backwards, it's the exact opposite. And furthermore, you can't even really read the notes. So there's just all these sticky notes everywhere and like trying to come up with a path and like kind of a key to getting through it because there's no previous way of kind of approaching that.
Yeah, I think we didn't really have a good idea of how to approach that at first. I remember really struggling with trying to find specific strings. I think it was before we realized we could just dampen ranges of strings, even if some of the notes we were dampening weren't ever even played. I don't know.
But yeah, I think there were like a lot of techniques that I feel like we came up with here, like notes in our score that later when other people started writing in a similar way, well, not similar, but using the inside of the piano.
Wolf, of course.
Influence, yes. We kind of had a leg up then on how to approach it, and we weren't starting from nothing. And so I really think with this piece, it was kind of the development of our approach. And I should say Ian and my approach is very different to how we can configure in our brains how to play the inside of the piano. You know, what I need on the paper is different than what he needs. And I think it still changes piece by piece, and you know, over time. When we played this at the Institute, it was like a whole other kind of approach. You know what I mean?
And I don't think I really realized how very hard it was going to be, especially finding the harmonics. I think we might have like made collective decision that there might have been some early draft where I was like, find the fourth harmonic on this, C sharp 5. And there are some things that are just so incredibly finicky and precise and difficult as to just not really be worth it. But yeah,
I was like, what's a harmonic series?
Well, right. It's like,
what's a note?
You see, Russell, yeah.
I think this might have been...
Did your multiples.
When this concert with Alex's piece, also with a lot of inside stuff, when we really fully realized that every single piano, even if it was a Steinway B, but a different Steinway
From
B,
like 1902, it's still like completely different on the inside.
Yeah.
And Ning,
People in the factory are just like trying to mess with contemporary composers. Let's put the bar over these notes here this time.
Right on the fifth harmonic.
Yeah,
Yes,
maybe this will prevent them from doing it.
I know, right.
Just stay on the keyboard, please.
I
Just
know,
Stay on the
right?
keyboard. Ning, you've played this piece, correct? Now.
Yes, I have, but only once.
And can you describe a little bit of sort of the position that you're in, sort of walking into this piece? Everyone else has played it except for you, and then you're basically stuck in this place playing catch up.
Sure. Actually, the first time I encountered this piece was when I watched Jacob playing it. It was 2011. It was in the old Issue Project room. Do you guys remember that concert?
Oh yeah.
Old Issue Project room.
But not the old.
Not the one.
Not
like
the
Guana's Canal.
Yeah, not the silo.
Yeah.
It's like Guanas, I believe,
Yeah.
right? Is
The
that
Guana, the
The really echoey one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
but not the silo.
big,
Yeah.
Right.
with the big round pillars in sort of in the
Inconvenient
middle.
places.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Much
right.
like old roulette, actually.
So that was 2011. I remember that was it was a really packed room full of energy, and that piece was on it. And I remember it's like looking at them, just trying to like twist my neck, watching you guys, seeing your arms and just intertwined, Laura and Jacob, and also Russell and Ian. And I was really, really impressed because I've never seen anything like that before at that time. But I didn't play the piece until 2016, I believe, at Yarnwire Institute, the first year when Kate was one of the faculty composers at our institute. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, oh, now I have to play this piece too. Because, looking at the score is very daunting because, it's so beautifully written. Everything is so intricate. And then the lineup of all the intricate rhythms is very precise. And just also understanding how that interacts with Ian Russell was quite the sort of a mental challenge to get there to be able to play.
And Kate, so You have a really beautiful program note for this piece. It's very short. I believe this is the program note. This is the one that was in the program, which maybe we can put up on the screen now to sort of see. And you reference a phrase there, which is "My, what big teeth you have," and of course that makes you think of Little Red Riding Hood. And I know, like, in a lot of your work, you mentioned sort of this ongoing series of YouTube works that you're doing, which is your unwritten operas, where you sort of hold up a book. It's very iconic. I think I really enjoy them. You hold up a book, and then you sort of use this as a source material to kind of then expound upon sort of an interpretation. And a lot of your work has sort of a literary reference to it. Is there something explicit about Red Riding Hood that sort of fits into this piece, or is it just a general idea or a concept?
Yeah, that would be interesting. I would say I wasn't thinking about Little Red Riding Hood, despite my blouse today, but maybe subconsciously. But I was thinking about the wolf. So yeah, I guess it was the fable. I mean, that's where the phrase doesn't come out of nowhere, but it was just some sense of the fairy tale character of the piano, maybe, and that it, again, to me, had this sort of kind of like sinister element, or just this I don't know if any of these things I'm saying now are actually what I thought, but this kind of like smugness of the piano, or just this like, what's in there? It's this like giant heavy thing with this huge bulging belly, but all you see are these like pearly strings, so it just sort of seemed to me to describe what I was going through as I kind of sat there and tried to figure it out. So I think it was like the feeling of the fairy tale and the feeling of the characterization, but not so much Little Red herself.
It's funny you say that. I did a bunch of research before this to sort of learn about the different versions of Little Red Riding Hood. I was like,
oh interesting. Glad I sent you down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, she went like really deep into like these things, and I totally came up with a whole justification. I was like,
wow.
Well, so
feel
brilliant.
free to write, another dissertation about like the intersections of wolf and,
we could just edit all this out and then redo it, and just like, oh yeah, totally, it's exactly this type of thing.
Yeah.
Then I would feel like my time was well spent. It was well spent. You should look into it. It's good.
I'm going to.
There's sort of an interesting interaction you have that I've observed with sort of instruments, which is that you like to kind of get in the way of sort of the normal operation of what's happening. And I think we have an image of you kind of getting in the way of violinist Josh Modney, where he's basically trying to play, and you start putting your hands all over his instrument and changing all these things while stuff's going on. There's other pieces, like I think a piece you've done with Ian for soprano and percussion, where you sort of start touching the bars on his marimba and sort of like interfering with this. Do you feel that that's part of Wolf, that it's just you like getting in the way of the normal operation of things?
Well, I think with Wolf, so with those other, when I do like to do that, I guess, but I think it's sort of, for me, when I'm performing, like with the examples you mentioned, there we are, with Josh or Ian or Erin Lesser, I've taken her flute apart while she's playing it. It's usually has a theatrical component that's very specific and explicit. So what does it mean to have the soprano suddenly playing an instrument in this way? And then it also throws the instrumentalist into a dramatic spotlight that they don't often get to occupy. And then usually for me, or always, it has there's some musical reason to do it. It's not just, clowning around. So like with Josh, it was so that we could have this kind of glistening on all four strings in different directions and like making these harmonic chords and stuff. And with Ian, it was so that we could, cover more range of the marimba and kind of participate in the conversation across the bars. With Wolf, I think, again, it was sort of like right before this era in which I wrote all those other pieces. I was less aware of the theatricality of interference that nevertheless is present, and more just thinking about, like, I think that's why, as I was saying, it was like a little harder than I realized to actually perform the percussion part, because I wasn't really thinking as much as I've grown used to about what the performers were going to go through. I was really just thinking about, like, how can I block the sound but more for the sound itself. Like what, you know, how can I dig into the piano? And then, yeah, there was kind of a, you know, a spatializing element in the whole piece, that it was this idea of 4 people crowded around a piano and eventually turning into 4 people standing away from the piano, even the pianists, and then returning to it. So yeah, I think it usually has a theatrical element, a sound component, and I think in Wolf it was maybe a little bit more focused on the sounds than on the cheekiness that might be part of my other efforts.
I feel I don't know about you, Russell, but it did always feel like some pursuit of what the pianists were playing. Like,
yeah, it always felt it was moving too fast.
We were kind of like chasing. Yeah.
I think we always did say, can we do it slower?
It's true. Gotta find those notes.
Well, yeah, that's because when you said see the hammer and then you immediately pluck it or something, there is a sense of like that, you know, whack-a-mole or whatever kind of game.
Exactly.
And it's interesting as well, because when Ning described her experience of sort of, you know, experiencing the piece the first time as a listener, you know, the first thing she described was sort of this multi-armed, you know, sort of beast, just sort of all twined together, which has such a, you know, a physical presence to it, you know, even perhaps more so than just like a regular, quote unquote, regular yarn wire performance where everyone's separated. Laura, I'm wondering, when you guys were putting the piece together, did you put special consideration at all to sort of not just the coordination, but sort of the theatrical performance of sort of like, oh, understanding this is going to be something that translates to an audience in sort of a more than just sonic way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, once you sort of square away all those elements, like Ian and Russell were talking about, just the coordination, the sort of bare bones choreography of a piece, because I think that's something someone else alluded to already. There is a point where we move away and we're playing wine glasses, and there's this other element of sound creation, and there are different physical spaces on the stage. And so I think once we get past the coordination part of how those things happen, we always talk about, what does this look like? You know, what are these movements? And I don't want to say that, it's not that it's contrived or put on in any way, I think, but we definitely are aware of how things look to an audience, and if there's something we're doing that people should be able to see, and if we can help facilitate that in some way. So yeah, I definitely think that was part of this piece as well.
And you bring up an interesting section of the piece, which is with the wine glasses and the temple bowls and things like that. And let's maybe listen to an excerpt of that. So this is about 10 minutes or so into the piece, and I wanted to listen to this because things really just suddenly change. The piece is, for so much of it, this incredibly intricate and connected thing that's so precise and fits together, and then it all just sort of like dissolves into something a little bit more ethereal. So let's take a listen to this example. So Kate, everything just sort of stops and it just sort of becomes this completely different piece for a moment. Can you talk a little bit about what exactly is happening?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's funny. I think this is the only place where I made a revision in the score after you guys recorded it. So it's supposed to, after the, the little like temple bowls and stuff, you're supposed to just hear like the woody tinkling piano at the top now. So too bad I didn't figure that out in time. But I mean, to me, I think it's just like moving to another layer. Like the material that happens right before that is a bunch of like very banal tonal pitch material within a kind of virtuosic 4-player context. So they're like Jacob and Laura are like playing constant like major scales and different keys against each other. And there's like this sort of Russell and Ian were kind of doing these regular rhythms that were very steady, but then just kept overlapping at different tempo speeds. So I think I was again just trying to think like, well, what is the piano and how can we end up listening? How can we listen underneath the surface somehow? And so at the start of the piece, it's this idea, well, if you can actually listen to the noise of the string, and then with the tonal material that precedes the clip that you just played, I think it's sort of like, okay, if the surface is so conventional, can we kind of hear something else about what's going on? And then when it just kind of runs into this these glittering kind of like post-tonal harmonies, I think it was just the sense that like, okay, now the piano is starting to resonate, which is another huge element of piano as we understand it. And then can that piano resonance be the four players just standing at different stations 10 feet away from the piano resonating things? So for me, it was just sort of trying to continue to like draw this line of like, okay, the piano is like, it's just like the sound of the string, but it's also the sound of, Russell playing a tempo bowl up stage left or something. So yeah, just some, it's less of a stop for me than like a kind of a continuation of something into this weird rhetorical land of like, we're still playing the piano, even though no one's actually laying a finger on it right now.
It's an incredibly beautiful moment. I mean, it, for me with my Red Riding Hood,
your research,
my research theory that I have paper, please. My TED Talk will be coming up soon.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. What I thought was really interesting was sort of the inclusion of the taigongs, because their harmonic spectrum is so like inharmonic, right? It's a lot of things that don't fit naturally, where so much of the piano is like a string-based thing, which is very, very harmonic. It has like a line that's continuing, and it really creates this ethereal, otherworldly sort of moment where everything drifts off. It's incredibly beautiful.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I love the sound of that when it happens. Don't totally remember, but I think I probably was just like, what do you guys have that's pitched? And I don't know if you guys told us not to use keyboard instruments, so I couldn't have like 2 vibraphones.
Probably.
But I do like now how it blurs everything. So you also get away from the equal temperament, which to an extent you get away from already at the beginning with the harmonics, because those are not going to be equally tempered.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty.
It's funny. I think that's how almost all scholarship goes. It's like, people are like, oh, there's all these reasons and all these things, and composers like, oh, it just sounded
just want
really
to disabuse
good.
everyone of
and they had these
intelligence.
I want to ask one more question before we sort of run out of time here, which is sort of been a big one that's been sitting on my mind since I started thinking about this piece, and I want to direct this towards Yarn Wire. So this piece is 10 years old now. This is becoming quote unquote old music. And for a group that's dedicated to commissioning new work, to commissioning things that are sort of on the edge of what's happening in the moment, how do you relate to a piece that is now, in the repertoire? It's perhaps no longer relevant to today's world. Maybe not. Maybe not. And is there an obligation as sort of an ensemble that's dedicated to always pushing forward, to occasionally revisit these things that sort of may somewhere be in the past? Or should that go to other groups and as it goes out to live into the world? Go.
Yes.
Yes. I think this is one of the first pieces actually that we commissioned that did get played by another group at some point. Am I right about that? I think
I'm not sure.
It's been played by other groups, so I don't know the
Yeah.
answer to that question. Yeah.
So certainly one of the first. Yeah.
one of the first, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we talk about a lot, right? Is it feels great to play pieces multiple times, right? And that's the sort of beauty of commissioning a work, is that you get to premiere it, and that's such a special experience in the process of collaborating with a composer like Kate or any of the composers that we've worked with over the years. But it is also, you get to know things differently. You play it better. The group grows together inside that piece. So there is this interesting sort of tension between the fact that, yes, we want to do new things all the time, let's create more and more, but also that desire to go deeper.
I feel like it's an interesting question, Argeo, because it has to do with time, like 10 years out from that piece, right? Like if you asked us that question like 4 years after it was written, the question really wouldn't be that impactful, right? But like 10 years now, we're looking back at a piece that and we're still performing is the thing, you know? So we're looking back at a piece, well, we were until now, should mention that. But looking back at a piece has kind of a personal history to it. You know, when I play a piece that's 10 years old, I like can remember that time. And on a personal level, that's really kind of profound. It's really important, like to kind of revisit my approach back then and see how I've changed as an individual. But just also with it comes so many memories, you know, of putting that piece together. I would say more often than not, when we revisit a piece, we're like, why did we think it was so hard before?
Totally.
And that's kind of funny. But you mentioned something about an obligation to moving music forward or something like that.
Well, an obligation to sort of continue to champion the pieces that you were instrumental in sort of bringing into the world.
Yeah, I think, you know, we do have an obligation to that. But like Laura said, one of the ways that can happen is other groups playing them, students playing them at the institute or wherever. That's been a constant source of joy, I think, when we get to hear people play these pieces that we played, and they uncover new secrets and new pitches, and that may not have been in the score then before. No, but I think there is an obligation for people who are interested in not just our repertoire, you know, for this instrumentation, which, you know, is just one piece of contemporary music, but people who are interested in contemporary music to kind of survey and be able to engage with this kind of stuff. I think that is important because it has informed our performance practice and probably other people's approaches to things too.
You know, I had a professor in college who brought the same question up to me when I was sort of, you know, trying to think that I was going to play a lot of new music. And he asked me, and I didn't have a good answer. And he said, might I suggest to you that you just don't worry about it. Just do whatever and let history sort it out. History is not your responsibility. And that's something that I've always thought about, whether or not he was right. But yeah, it's just interesting to hear everyone's different perspectives on sort of like how you relate to history as you make it, which is maybe not a thing you think about when you're in college, but as you get older, you think about the past more and more.
I will say, Argeo, if I can interrupt right then, like that was kind of part of the impetus behind like doing a lot of these talks actually, is a way of kind of not forcing ourselves, but giving ourselves the opportunity to look back at things and kind of like remember them and dig in, you know, kind of encountering our own history and stuff like that, you know.
That's what happens when you get older, right?
Yeah, my knees.
My knees. Kate, I know the world is in a little bit of a flux right now, but what does the future hold for you that you're aware of?
Well, yeah, I'm not sort of waiting like everyone else, but well, I wrote an opera that was going to premiere in April that was postponed, so that will happen at some point. I feel reasonably confident. And yeah, I mean, I am kind of making more amateur videos now, the unwritten operas thing you mentioned, and then I also just finished a web series called Syrinx, and might do a couple other things here. And yeah, just various other projects. I wrote a play last year, so I'm sort of might do a Zoom reading of that. But yeah, I think it's, you know, like many of us, it's just a year to kind of keep your creative work going, but also just kind of keep an eye on the world and try to stay grounded and help out how you can. And then, yeah, I'm starting my teaching semester next week, so I will be doing a lot more Zooming. Thank you.
And if people want to find out more information about you, what's the best way for them to discover?
Well, I have a website, katesoper.com, and you can contact me there or sign up for my mailing list, which I don't sign up very often. And I have a YouTube channel, which is also Kate Soper. And I just started using Twitter last week. I don't know if it was the best time to get on, but
I think we followed.
I'm on there. I think you did, because I followed you first, though.
Yeah.
You followed me back. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
But that's Soper Kate, and then yeah, that's it for now. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out if it's the right thing to do to enter into social media now that all of our lives and communities are online, or if it's the wrong thing to do. So, but website is there, YouTube is there.
Excellent.
And yeah.
Wonderful. And this episode of Feedback is drawing to a close, sadly. But there are more episodes of Feedback, which will be continuing twice a week. Wondering if someone could tell me what the next episode of Feedback is going to be.
Yeah, next on Tuesday, September 1st, we have composer Mei Fang Lin in conversation with Yarnwire, with our past members Jacob Rodebeck and Daniel Schlossberg, moderated by musicologist Erica Scheinberg.
Excellent. And where can people find that?
You can watch it at our website, yarnwire.org. You can find us on YouTube Live, Twitch, our Facebook page, and on Patreon.
What's Patreon?
Patreon, Argeo, since you asked, is an online community. And so I think the best way to sum it up is, instead of just asking for your support this season, this year, we're asking that you consider not just a donation, but becoming part of an online community that we've created at patreon.com. Just search for Yarnwire. And for a monthly membership, you get access to all sorts of great benefits. And as always, episodes of Feedback will be up for free for the general public.
Excellent. That's wonderful. Well, I believe this brings us to a close. I wanted to, first of all, thank Kate for being with us, and thank Jacob for being with us. Thank you both so much. And also thank the members of Yarnwire, Ning, Ian, Laura, and Russell. Thank you very much for having me and having all of us. This is a wonderful series that I'm very, very honored to be part of. And I want to give a special shout out to our technical director, Robert Cosgrove. Thank you so much. This is where he cuts out my mic. No, just to let us know that he's here. Thanks, Robert, for making all of this go. We appreciate it. And to thank all of you listening in internet and radio land. In times of strife, it is important that we are generous and kind with one another. So good luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah.